Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottama devim saraswatim vyasam tato jaya mudiraye nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavate uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati nashtiki. So we're reading from Canto 5, Chapter 14, text number 2. Yasyam uha va ete shad indriya namanah karmana dasyava evate tad yatha purushasya dhanam yat kinchit dharmopaikam bahu krichradikatam sakshad parama purusharadhana lakshano yosau dharmas tam tu samparaya udaharanti tad dharmyam dhanam darshana sparshana shravana swadana vagrahana grahana sankalpa vyavasaya graha gramyopabhogena kunathasyajitatmano yatha sarthasya vilumpanti. Word to word meanings. Yasyam, in which. Uha, certainly. Va, or. Ete, all these. Shad indriya namanaha, who are named the six senses. The mind and the five knowledge acquiring senses. Karmana, by their activity. Dasyavaha, the plunderers. Eva, certainly. Te, they. Tat, that. Yatha, as. Purushasya, of a person. Dhanam, the wealth. Yat, whatever. Kinchit, something. Dharma opaikam, which is a means to religious principles. Bahu krichra adhikatam, earned after much hard labor. Sakshat, directly. Parama Purusha Aradhana Lakshana, whose symptoms are worship of the Supreme Lord by performance of sacrifices and so on. Yaha, which. Asau, that. Dharma, religious principles. Tam, that. Tu, but. Samparaye, for the benefit of the living entity after death. Udaharanti, the wise declare. Tad dharmayam, religious, relating to the prosecution of varnashrama dharma. Dhanam, wealth. Darshana, by seeing. Sparshana, by touching. Shravana, by hearing. Aswadana, by tasting. Avagrahana, by smelling. Sankalpa, by determination. Vyavasaya, by a conclusion. Graha, in the material home. Gramya upabhogena, by material sense gratification. Kunathasya, of the misguided conditioned soul. Ajita Atmanaha, who has not controlled himself. Yatha, just as. Sarthasya, of the living entity interested in sense gratification. Vilumpanti, they plunder. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation: in the forest of material existence, the uncontrolled senses are like plunderers. The conditioned soul may earn some money for the advancement of Krishna consciousness. But unfortunately, the uncontrolled senses plunder his money through sense gratification. The senses are plunderers because they make one spend his money unnecessarily for seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, desiring, and willing. In this way, the conditioned soul is obliged to gratify his senses, and thus all his money is spent. This money is actually acquired for the execution of religious principles, but it is taken away by the plundering senses. Purport: Purva Janmarjita Vidya, Purva Janmarjita Dhanam, Agre Dhavati Dhavati. By following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma, one attains a better position in the material world. One may be rich, learned, beautiful, or high-born. One who has all these assets should know that they are all meant for the advancement of Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, when a person is misguided, he misuses his high position for sense gratification. Therefore, the uncontrolled senses are considered plunderers. The good position one attains by executing religious principles is wasted as the plundering senses take it away. By executing religious principles under the laws of Varnashrama Dharma, one is placed in a comfortable position. One may very easily use his assets for the further advancement of Krishna consciousness. One should understand that the wealth and opportunity one gets in the material world should not be squandered in sense gratification. They are meant for the advancement of Krishna consciousness. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore teaching people to control the mind and 5 knowledge acquiring senses by a definite process. One should practice a little austerity and not spend money on anything other than regulative life of devotional service. The senses demand that one see beautiful things. Therefore, money should be spent for decorating the deity in the temple. Similarly, the tongue has to taste good food, which should be bought and offered to the deity. The nose can be utilized in smelling the flowers offered to the deity, and hearing can be utilized by listening to the vibration of the Hare Krishna mantra. In this way, the senses can be regulated and utilized to advance Krishna consciousness. Thus, a good position might not be spoiled by material sense gratification in the form of illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. One spoils an opulent position in the material world by driving cars, spending time in nightclubs, or tasting abominable food in restaurants. In this way, the plundering senses take away all the assets that the conditioned soul has acquired with great difficulty. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapad Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyat Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tushe Nama He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Vancha Kalpataro Bhishya Kripa Sindhu Bhaye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mokam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatam Ham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishvara. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be discussing this verse from the 5th canto, which, as we have all discussed, is a discussion going on between Jad Bharat and Maharaj Rahugana. So we see in the previous chapter, in the 13th chapter, last verse, Parikshit Maharaj asked a question to Shukdev Goswami. So Parikshit Maharaj asked that you have very nicely described so many things. We have very nicely described the position of the conditioned soul, how he enters the forest, and by an allegorical story, you have very nicely described multiple aspects of it. And then he says that, okay, these instructions which you gave, intelligent people can easily understand them, can easily understand, assimilate the meaning of these instructions. But what about others? Because he knew the position of people in Kali Yuga. So what about the unintelligent people who are there? So he says, please elaborate the meaning of that. Because that time we didn't have these Bhaktivedanta purports and all. So he said that please elaborate those meanings, that what about all these different aspects, unintelligent people if they are not able to understand. So this is an explanation of the previous chapter. In the previous chapter, in the 13th chapter, the second verse that was spoken, that talks about in the forest of material existence, there are 6 very powerful plunderers. And here, Shukdev Goswami is explaining the meaning of that. That who are the powerful plunderers he was speaking about. And here he talks about that those 6 powerful plunderers were the 6 senses. And just like the 6 plunderers, they misguide him in the previous verse, it was given in that 13th chapter, that the conditioned merchant does not know how to spend his money. And it is taken away by these plunderers, like tigers, jackals, and other ferocious animals in a forest that are ready to take away a lamb from the custody of its protector. Similarly, the family members enter the heart of the merchant and plunder him in so many ways. So this is how the different comparisons are explained in this chapter, that how the wealth that a person acquires. So in the purport also Prabhupada explains, through practice of Varnashram Dharma, through practice of the regulative principles, whatever wealth, whatever artha he acquires in his life, if the senses are uncontrolled, senses are not properly tamed, then the wealth is plundered away, or the entire wealth is stolen. Because the senses engage in so many sense gratification activities, sense gratificatory activities, and so the wealth of the person, which is actually meant for service of the Lord, which as this verse says, tad dharmyam, or for the service of the Lord, is actually plundered away, or that wealth is taken away. And the only reason is because the mind is not strong. Intelligence is weak. And that's why the senses drive the person towards sense gratification. So this is how this proper explanation of the allegorical story that was given, different analogies that were given, that is made here. So we see something we'll discuss about the senses, that how the senses work and what is the state in the conditional aspect for a conditional living entity. And when a person is purified, then what is the state? So we have this shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, very famous shloka from the 3rd chapter. Indriyani paranye ahor, indribhya param mana, manasastu para buddhir, yo buddhe paratastu saha. So what it means, it gives a hierarchy. It gives a hierarchy that greater than the dull matter that is there are the working senses. The senses of a person are greater than dull matter. And greater than the senses is the mind. Greater than mind is the intelligence. And then he says soul is even higher than the mind. Yo buddhe paratastu saha. So this hierarchy that is given, we don't see this applicable generally in people. It's actually the other way around. So the very nice explanation of this was given, that this is actually a constitutional hierarchy that is there, or the hierarchy of a self-realized soul. As we know the example of the chariot, generally the senses, if they are not controlled, the horses just run away in any direction. And the mind, if it's weak or the bridle is not strong, then the intelligence is not able to control the mind. So this hierarchy that we see here is actually for a person who is self-realized, who has actually controlled over his senses, and then his intelligence can control the mind and mind can control the senses. There is another shloka, very interesting shloka in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, which talks about the hierarchy of a conditional living entity. So this shloka talks about tadasya harati pragyam vayur navam ivambasi. That how just like there is a strong wind. So strong wind, it takes away or it moves the boat along with it. A boat sailing in the sea, the strong wind just takes it away. Similarly, even if one of the senses is not controlled, or even if one of the roaming senses is not under control and the mind dwells in it, then it carries away the intelligence with it. Or even if one of our senses is not controlled, as we give the example of those 5 animals who have even one sense uncontrolled, and their intelligence is driven away, or their mind and intelligence is driven away, and they get destroyed. Similarly, this shloka talks about that how even if one of our senses is not controlled and mind dwells on it, then it carries away the person's intelligence. And so very clearly it's made in this purport also that how all the senses have to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Even if one sense is uncontrolled, or one sense we are not able to control that sense properly, then that can deviate us from the path of devotional service. And this analogy or this hierarchy that we see is the hierarchy we have in the conditioned state, where the senses are driving us towards the sense objects, and that's why the mind is not strong. Mind cannot control the senses. So the senses, the person engages in sense gratification. Because we see the senses, or even the mind, to control the senses, it needs empowerment from the senses itself. Unless the senses are not controlled, senses are engaged in all these activities, the mind also gets corrupted. As we have that shloka, Bandhur Atmat Manastasya, that if mind, if controlled, is the best of the friends, and mind, if not controlled, can be the worst of the enemies. So when the senses are uncontrolled, the mind gets corrupted, mind corrupts the intelligence, and the person actually gets deviated from the path. So this is what we see. This actually is the conditional hierarchy, or the hierarchy we have at this state, where the senses take over everything, and senses are so strong that pull the person's mind and inner intelligence away. So now this question is asked, okay, many times this question is asked, we should not perform mechanical devotional service, or devotional service should be with some feeling. Or as we say in other words, spontaneous devotional service, that we should do spontaneous devotional service, not mechanical devotional service. And similar example we have in Kunti Maharani prayers. Like Kunti Maharani also prays similarly, that example she gives, Gange Vogam Ivambasi, just like Gange Vogam Udanvati. Just like the Ganges naturally flows towards the sea. Ganges flows towards the sea without any hindrance. Similar to that, let my mind also be attracted towards your devotional service, or let my mind be spontaneously absorbed in your thoughts. So this is an example of spontaneous devotional service which Kunti Maharani is praying for, unalloyed devotional service, where the mind naturally flows towards the Lord, naturally flows towards the thoughts of the Lord. But now we see that our mind, the problem is something different. So our mind, the problem is because our mind naturally flows towards sense gratification. So problem, as we speak multiple times, that we should not do mechanical devotional service, or in better terms we can say devotional service with less spontaneity. So that is not the problem. Problem for us is spontaneous sense gratification, that our mind is engaged spontaneously in sense gratification activities. And that's why it becomes very, very important that before we expect that our mind is engaged in the sense of thoughts of the Lord, our senses have to be engaged in the activities of the Lord. This is what this purport very nicely explains, how all the senses can be engaged in different activities for serving the Lord. Even in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna talks about the 3 places of lust. So what are the 3 sitting places of lust? We know mind, intelligence, and the senses. And there also, when Arjuna speaks about controlling these 3, he first of all begins with the senses. Or he first of all speaks about the senses, how to control the senses or engage the senses. Because to control the mind, first of all, the senses have to be controlled. If the senses are engaged in sense gratificatory activities and the input that is coming in the mind is all garbage, then that is what the mind will naturally be engaged in. Unless and until the senses are engaged in a proper way, or the healthy food is given to the mind cannot be controlled. We cannot expect the mind to artificially just control the mind. And that's why it said that whatever it is we feel like or not, that's what we call Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. That we have to perform this Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti under rules and regulations, whether we feel like doing it or whether we don't. Because currently our stage is not like that we can expect spontaneous devotional service, or a mind naturally flows towards the Lord. And very nice example I was hearing, just like an example of a house is given. Just like there is a house, there are windows in it, multiple windows, and a door is there. And now outside there is a storm that is blowing, a very, very great wind that is blowing. And we see a storm that is blowing, so naturally dust will come inside the house. And now a person wants to clean the house. So he takes up a broom, he starts cleaning the house, he starts cleaning everything, mopping everything. But will that work? Unless and until he closes the windows, unless and until he closes the door and everything, no matter how much he tries to clean, it won't make any difference. Similarly, if we want to clean the mind, or if we want to engage or purify the mind, first of all, as I already mentioned, the senses have to be engaged properly. Or unless and until we block those activities of the senses, which take away from the devotional service, take us away from the right path, we can't expect the mind to be naturally engaged, or we can't expect the mind to be cleansed. And that's why it said that whether we feel like or not, we have to engage this. First of all, the first process is to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. We cannot skip this stage, or we cannot directly jump from spontaneous sense gratification to spontaneous devotional service. This stage has to be there, or we have to perform Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti with rules and regulations. Initially, it will happen that mind will follow the senses in initial stage. Because the senses are properly engaged in devotional service, mind will also follow. Only with time, when the mind is befriended, it will start pulling the senses. Or then the mind will be properly engaged or nicely engaged in the service or in thoughts of the Lord. Or as we call the smaranam. So then we'll be able to remember about the Lord, then we'll be able to think about the Lord, when first of all we have got purified to a sufficient extent. Like once I was hearing an example, so one very senior sannyasi, Gaur Krishna Maharaj, so he was asking one devotee that whether are you chanting or bhakti is happening nicely, you're chanting 16 rounds. And that devotee, he said, no Maharaj, I am not able to chant. And then Maharaj said that why you are not chanting, what is the problem? And that person just said, ki Maharaj, man nahi lag raha hai, I am not feeling like chanting. And Maharaj said that, okay, if you don't chant or if japa nahi karoge, to man lagega kya? Matlab, if you don't do, then mind will start engaging in that, or mind will start have the desire to do that. What he meant is, man lage na lage, whatever you feel like or not, you have to engage in devotional service, or you have to practice sadhana bhakti properly. And only with time, when we speak about smaranam or thinking about the Lord or spontaneous devotional service, that comes at a very high stage, or after anathanivritti, after nishtha, that comes at the stage of ruchi. Before that, we have to be steady in the practice of devotional service. With that, when time, as we were hearing in that discussion, Vamsivadan Prabhu was also telling, that when we are steady in our practice of devotional service with time, then the taste, or then by the Lord's mercy, the taste comes. We cannot expect that to come before without engaging our senses in the service of the Lord. So similarly, in this purport also we see Prabhupada gives this example. By following the principles of the Varnashrama Dharma, one attains a better position in the material world. And he gives that one may be rich, learned, beautiful, or high-born. So one who has all these assets should know that they are meant for advancement of Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, when a person is misguided, he misuses his high position for sense gratification. So here he speaks about that how all the assets the person acquires. Even he speaks about the Varnashrama Dharma, that a person who is practicing Varnashrama Dharma properly, who is practicing the different Varnas, we know all the Varnas that are there, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, and all the different ashramas, who is practicing all that, the ultimate purpose is to engage in the devotional service of the Lord. We have that famous shloka from the Bhagavatam, Ata Pumbir Duja Shreshta Varnashrama Vibhagasa Swanushtitasta Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam, which speaks about the same things, that all the regulative principles of the Varnashrama Dharma, all the things, all the duties, prescribed duties a person performs, ultimately it is meant for the pleasure of Lord Hari. Or Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. The perfection can only be attained when the Lord is pleased by all that. If Lord is not pleased by the endeavors, then that becomes Shama Evahi Kevalam, just a waste of time, just unnecessary hard work, with no advantage, with no benefit out of it. And that's what in that also he mentioned here. Unfortunately, when a person is misguided, he misuses his high position for sense gratification. And that is what we see happening all around. People have all these things. There may be people very rich, people high-born, people learned, but still they are engaging in all the sense gratification activities. Even though they might have acquired all that wealth by performing some good karma in their previous lives, they might have got those opportunities, But then they don't engage all those activities in the devotional service. They just waste it in all these sense gratification or nonsense activities. And the best example we can see when we go around in these places like malls and all, we see people very nicely dressed, well dressed, very nicely they speak also, very rich, coming from rich families, spending so much money in the malls, buying so many costly things. But as soon as they see the Bhagavad Gita, they just turn their face away. Or as soon as they see the people in dhoti kurta, they think these are some aliens. They just don't even look at us. And that famous term I was hearing some Gen Z or these people are of that generation Z, that they completely don't believe or reject all these things. So this is what Prabhupada is speaking about, that how a person, he gets a high position, but unfortunately because he is misguided, he used the position for sense gratification. And even for us as devotees, one thing that is very, very important here, that to always being whatever facilities we get after performing bhakti, different facilities we get, like people may be driven by that, or people get driven or deviated from the path of pure devotional service because of the facilities that come along with practice of bhakti. Like we all know the things about, we speak so much about name, fame, prestige, or wealth, or reputation, so many things that come along with the person who is practicing devotional service. But then there is a high probability if the person's goal is not fixed, or he's not fixed, or his aspirations is not clear, then he might get deviated from the pure devotional path. And that's why that famous statement that Prabhupada made, that most of my disciples will go to heavenly planets. And the only reason why he made that statement was because he knew that most of these people, they'll hang on to the material desires, or they'll not give away those material desires, and that is the reason they won't be able to attain the highest goal. And that's why we can understand from this that whatever facilities, whatever things we get, ultimately we should understand that that is all the mercy of the Lord, and our goal and our aspiration should be very, very clear. Or we should always remember what we have come here for, what was our original intention of coming here. Because in Kali Yuga, the natural tendency is to forget everything. Natural tendency is to we have to always recall, always again and again, repeat that point, to remember that again and again. So that is why these things, to always aspire for the goal, to always remember the goal, becomes very, very important. And that's why finally in the purport, Prabhupada talks about engaging all the senses in service of the Lord. And we have the famous example of Amrish Maharaj. Amrish Maharaj, who was such a big emperor, such a big ruler, and who had all the opulences, such a big kingdom was there, and everything, all the facilities he had. But then he engaged all the facilities in the service of the Lord. Even when we know the example of Durvasa Muni, that when Durvasa Muni became envious of him, and by his mystic potency, he created that demon just to kill Amrish Maharaj. But Amrish Maharaj was still fearless. Amrish Maharaj was still thinking about the Supreme Lord, still meditating on the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, and he was not at all affected. But as we all know, because the Lord is, the dear devotees of the Lord are very, very dear to the Lord, so the Lord sent the Sudarshan Chakra, which chopped off the head of the demon, and then it started running behind Durvasa Muni. So this is how we see the nature of great devotees, that when they engage all their senses in the service of the Lord, then they are completely fixed, or they are not affected by anything. And this is how we can also increase our attraction for the Supreme Lord and actually get completely free from the material desires by engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. And we have these famous shlokas of Amrish Maharaj, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vandyo, Vacham Shi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane, Karo Harir Mandir Majanadushu, Shutim Chakara, Achyuta Sat Katodaya. How he speaks all the different senses that are there. When it comes to Vachamsi, or the power to speak, that should be engaged in the glorification of the Lord. When it comes to the hands, that should be engaged in cleaning the temple of the Lord. And how he speaks about how he himself engages all his senses in the service of the Lord and becomes such a great devotee, or gets purified of all the material desires that are there. And on the other hand, Prabhupada in the last points out that person who spoils this position, or who doesn't understand the value of the life, then they engage in all these illicit activities like illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. One spoils an opulent position in the material world by driving cars, spending time in nightclubs, or tasting abominable food in restaurants. In this way, the plundering senses take away all the assets that the conditioned soul has acquired with great difficulty. So as we already discussed throughout the class, if the senses, they are not controlled, they plunder the entire wealth of the person. And the person just spoils the human form of life. Or just doesn't take, the human just doesn't get to the ultimate goal of the human form of life and gets misguided by doing all these activities. So also today is the disappearance day. So this I would like to end, and we'll discuss something about Ramananda Rai, since he's a very, very great devotee, one of our prominent acharyas in our sampradaya. And today is his auspicious disappearance day. And actually Lord is very, very pleased when we discuss about the dear devotees of the Lord, especially when we have these disappearance days, appearance days. And when we glorify the devotees of the Lord, Lord becomes very, very satisfied. Lord becomes very, very pleased, and his mercy flows. So this is an amazing opportunity to discuss about these dear devotees. So we'll discuss something about him. So we know in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, in our acharyas, he was one of the most prominent acharyas. He was very, very close associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, very, very dear to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the last 18 years or in the last 12 years when he lived, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there in Puri, and mostly he resided in a place called as Gambhira. That time we know there were two devotees with him, very, very of a most intimate associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they were Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to feel intense separation from the Lord, and he was in ecstatic feelings, he was feeling intense separation and ecstatic emotions, that time these two devotees used to pacify him. Swarup Damodar singing nice glories of the Lord, and Ramananda Rai also speaking different verses from the Bhagavatam. And that's how they used to pacify the Lord. So he was very, very dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we'll discuss something about him. So it's mentioned in one of the scriptures, God Ganodesh Deepika, that Ramananda Rai was actually the incarnation, he was the incarnation of multiple personalities actually. So one of them was Arjuna. So it's described that he was incarnation of Arjuna in this Kali Yuga. Another personality, he was incarnation of a Priya Narma Sakha, whose name was also Arjuna. In the Vraj Leela, or among the Gopas of Krishna, he was incarnation of this. And in the Gopis, he was the incarnation of Arjunia Sakhi. So he was the incarnation of that personality. And also, he was the incarnation, he is said to be the incarnation of Vishaka Sakhi. Some of them also called, somewhere it's also given, he was the incarnation of Lalita Sakhi. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned that he was the incarnation of Vishaka Sakhi. So like that, he was a mixture of all. Very, very great personality, very, very divine personality. So this personality, Ramananda Rai, he appeared at a place. Near to Puri, we have Alarnath. And near to Alarnath, there is a village, Bentapur. That was the place, that was the appearance place of Ramananda Rai. And even now, I was hearing, even now the house is still preserved. And there are multiple things that are there. There are few pages that are kept there, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally wrote few shlokas on those pages. They are still preserved there. There is a sword kept there, that is also preserved from that time. So that place he appeared, and his father's name was Bhavananda Rai. So Bhavananda Rai has 5 sons, and the eldest was Ramananda Rai. And it's described that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Bhavananda Rai for the first time, he embraced him and he told that you were Pandu in the Krishna Leela. In the Dwapar Yuga, you were actually Pandu, and all your 5 sons are the 5 Pandavas. Ramananda Rai being Arjuna. So of course, Ramananda Rai was though the eldest, but he was Arjuna. He was not Yudhishthira. So like that, it's described Lord Chaitanya, every year he used to go to this place. Every year he used to go to Alarnath and also to the birthplace of Ramananda Rai. And Ramananda Rai was very, very dear to him. So we'll discuss something about the meeting of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai, how it happened in South India. So we all know, before going to South India, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there. He delivered Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. And they had a huge conversation, huge discussion. And after that, Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya actually surrendered to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started leaving for South India Yatra, that time Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya requested him that you should meet one devotee there. In South India, there is a place called as Vidyanagar. And there is a very, very great, very, very exalted devotee who stays there. And that time, earlier I was an impersonalist. Earlier I did not know the glories of the Vaishnavas. So I could not appreciate his emotions, or I could not appreciate his behavior. But now that I have been enlightened by your mercy, I can confidently tell you that he's a very, very exalted devotee. He had a great knowledge of the rasas of devotional service. And he's a great Rasika devotee. Now here one thing we see that even Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya is described, he was the incarnation of Brahaspati. Very, very great scholar he was. And though he was in the Grahastha ashram, he used to teach even to the sannyasis. He used to teach Vedanta to the sannyasis. Such a great scholar he was. But still, even he couldn't understand the position of Ramanand Rai, or even he couldn't understand how great devotee he is, because until the time he got the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So without the mercy of the devotees, no one can understand about the glorious devotees of the Lord. That is the point. Just by erudition, just by knowledge, one cannot understand. So now, when after being requested by Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu begins his South India Yatra. So it's described he goes to multiple places. First of all, he goes to a place called as Kurmakshetra. So Kurmakshetra, we have the famous story where there was this village known as Kurma. And there, the deity also is known as Kurma. And the Brahmana, his name was also Kurma. So there Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes, he delivers that Brahmana. And after his deliverance, when he starts leaving that place, so this Kurma Brahmana who was there, he requested Mahaprabhu, he said that I want to give up family life, I want to come with you. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejects. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, no, you stay at your home, you stay at your place, and you continue your practice of devotional service. No need to leave or no need to come with me. And finally, after leaving that place, he goes to another place, Narsimha temple near Simhachalam. He visits Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, visits that place. And after that, he goes to Godavari. So Mahaprabhu goes near Godavari, he takes bath in there. And then he reaches this place known as Vidyanagar. So I was hearing this place, now it's known as Rajamundri. The place we have called as Rajamundri, that was the place known as Vidyanagar at that time. And there, this person, or there, Ramanand Rai was the governor of that area. The ruler of the entire area of that entire region was Prataprutra. And Ramanand Rai was one of his governors that was there. So now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after taking bath in the holy river, he knew that this is the place and he was waiting for Ramanand Rai. And then a huge procession arrives there. So Ramanand Rai, since he was the governor, he was being carried in a palanquin. And there was a huge procession then that comes there. There were musicians who were playing music. And there were Brahmanas who were chanting Vedic mantras. And Ramanand Rai comes with all of them. And just by when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw Ramanand Rai, he understood. By his effulgence, by his personality, he could understand that this is Raman, this is the person Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya actually asked me to meet. And then Ramanand Rai comes, he takes his bath. And when he comes out of Godavari, he also sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he sees a bright, very bright, great effulgence coming from this personality. And he also understood this is some very great personality. So then Ramanand Rai goes, he pays his obeisances to Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was very eager. He was very eager to meet him, to embrace him. So he just asked him, please get up and chant the names of Krishna. And as soon as he gets up, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraces him. And it's very interesting when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked to Ramanand Rai about his background, that who are you? And the introduction with Ramanand Rai gives, it was also in a very, very humble way he introduces himself. He says that I am a very, very fallen person, I am a lowly servant, and I belong to the Shudra community. He doesn't say that I am that great Ramanand Rai you heard about, or I am that great devotee. And this is how we see everyone in Chaitanya Leela. We see so many personalities. When Sanatan Goswami meets Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for the first time, he also introduced himself like that I am the Adham, I am the fallen of the fallen, and in a very humble way. Even though Sanatan Goswami was also a great scholar. And here Ramanand Rai actually was a very exalted, very advanced devotee. But when he meets Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he introduces himself in that way, that I am a very lowly servant and I belong to the Shudra community. And like that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they both hug each other, and then naturally after when the Lord meets the great devotees of the Lord, naturally those ecstatic emotions come out. So both of them started displaying ecstatic emotions. They started sweating, perspiring, and all those emotions started coming out. But all the people who were accompanying Ramanand Rai, the Brahmanas that were there, they were just ritualistic Brahmanas, or they were just Brahmanas following the Vedic scriptures. They were not Vaishnavas. And they could not understand what is happening here. Because they knew that this is a sannyasi. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a sannyasi of the highest order. And Ramanand Rai is a Shudra. That they could not understand that why this sannyasi is hugging this Shudra, or why this sannyasi is hugging this person. And same way they thought that this Ramanand Rai, he's a great Pandit, he's a governor. They could not understand why this great Pandit is hugging this sannyasi and he's also displaying all these ecstatic emotions, why he's behaving like that. And that's why, seeing all that, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw all those Brahmanas, he just controlled his emotions, or he just suppressed his emotions for that time being. And this is a very, very important teaching for us, that we should not display the aesthetic emotions in public. So of course we don't have we don't have such aesthetic emotions. What I meant was, like, generally when people are going out, or when people are traveling, especially in public places, and when they are chanting, so sometimes they become ecstatic while chanting and they start shaking vigorously. Sometimes they put some cloth on their face and they start chanting in a very vigorous way. And other people actually become fearful. So that's why it's very, very important that whenever we are in a public place, whenever we are going somewhere, we should avoid displaying all these ecstatic emotions. We should always be sober in front of them. At least that time we should always be sober, but that time we should definitely take care that we don't display all these ecstatic emotions. So now, after all this happens, both of them start speaking to each other in a very humble way. Ramanand Rai says that my birth has become successful, I have got your mercy. And just by Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya's mercy, because he showered his mercy on me, I got your association. That my life has become successful just by your association. And then he also speaks, even though I'm a Shudra, and a sannyasi is actually not supposed to touch a Shudra according to scriptures. But still you showered your mercy, still you are such a great personality, you don't care for the Vedic scriptures. Of course, what he meant was, he could understand he's the supreme personality of Godhead. So the scriptures doesn't apply to him, and that's why you showered your mercy on me. And then he says very amazing things. He says that you have come here specifically to deliver me. You have come here mercifully so that you can deliver all the fallen souls. Because he knew the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's why he says that it's a great mercy upon me, it's a great mercy by Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya that you come here just to deliver me, just to shower your mercy on me. So now, even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that it's not me, it's because of you. It's because you are a topmost devotee, and that's why I got this amazing opportunity to meet you. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu displays his humility. And he says all these Brahmanas that are there, even now they are also chanting Krishna's name. They are also speaking, or from their tongues Krishna's name is coming out. That is because of your mercy. Just because you are such an exalted devotee, you have melted their hearts and they are also chanting the names of the Lord. This is how both of them praised each other, both of them spoke to each other in humility. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was invited for lunch by some Vaishnava there. So he goes at his home, and then they decide to meet in the evening. Even though they were very, very eager to meet each other, even though they were very, very eager to speak with each other, but still they decide, they go away, they part away that time, and then they decide that they'll meet in the evening. And this is when in the evening, when Ramanand Rai comes and when both of them meet each other, so it's described they meet each other in a secluded place, and that is where a very, very important discussion starts, which is like the very, very essence of our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, or which is very, very deep. As Prabhupada described, it's a PhD subject that happens. The discussion that happens is actually a PhD subject which is described. And there, through Ramanand Rai, actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brings out so many truths of the philosophy, or so many esoteric truths are brought out through the medium of Ramanand Rai. It's basically a question and answer that happens. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks many questions to Ramanand Rai, and Ramanand Rai reveals the different answers, reveal the different truths that are there. So we'll just cover that in brief, a little bit of that aspect, because it's very difficult to understand those aspects. So first question that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks Ramanand Rai is, what is the ultimate goal of all the scriptures? Or what is the ultimate goal of life from the scriptures? And again, a very important point is mentioned here, and even in the response of Ramanand Rai, we see, whatever he speaks, he just quotes from the scriptures. He doesn't just speak that I feel like this or it should be like this. Mahaprabhu also asked him the direct question that tell me from scriptures what is the ultimate goal of life. And in Ramanand Rai also starts quoting from the scriptures. So first of all, Ramanand Rai speaks about the Varnashrama Dharma, that is the goal of life, that is the perfection of life. When the people are engaged in their prescribed duties and people do that for the satisfaction of the Lord. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to know more. So he says, Eho bhaiya aage kaho, or that speaks something more. This is all external. And then Ramanand Rai speaks about giving the result of one's activities to the Lord. He quotes that shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, Yat karoshi yad ashrasi, yat tapasyasi juhoshi yat, that engaging or giving the results of our activities to the Supreme Lord. And then he speaks about, and then even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks him to describe even further. And then he describes about giving up the occupational duties, giving up the varnashrama dharma, and engaging in this devotional service of the Lord. That is the essence of perfection. And he quotes that shloka, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was little satisfied, but he says that speak more, I want to hear more. Then Ramananda Rai speaks about devotional service mixed with, basically Jnana Yoga, he speaks about that devotional service mixed with empiric knowledge, that is the essence of all perfection. And for everything he speaks, he quotes a shloka. So here also he quotes that shloka, Brahma Bhuta Prasanna Atma na sochati na kankshati. That is the essence of all perfection. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu still was not satisfied. He said, tell me more. And finally he comes to the point, he speaks about pure devotional service without any touch of speculative knowledge. That is the essence of all perfection. And he quotes one very famous prayer of Lord Brahma. He speaks about that prayer which Lord Brahma, which comes in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Jnane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti san mukhiratam bhavadiya vartam sthane sthita shrutigatam tanuvan manobir ye prayaso jita jit api asya trilokyam. That he speaks that we have to give up all these endeavors of jnana and karma, as we know the definition of pure devotional service, anya abhilasita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. That giving up all these endeavors in karma yoga, jnana yoga, if a person takes to pure devotional service without any tinges of any other yoga system, then that is the essence of all perfection. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hears this, then he is satisfied little bit. But then also he speaks, this is all right, but you can still speak more on the subject. Because he knows that Ramananda Rai knew more, or Ramananda Rai had even higher knowledge of even higher mellows of devotional service. So then Ramananda Rai further speaks, I'll just speak that in the first, he speaks about Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Then he speaks about Sadhana Bhakti in spontaneous devotional service in ecstatic perfection, or this where the person spontaneously does devotional service. Ramananda Rai speaks about that. And then he further speaks about the further rasas that are there. That serving the Supreme Lord as a servant, serving the Supreme Lord as a friend. And then he speaks about serving the Supreme Lord as a parent. And finally, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks him about more and more, that tell me the more, he finally speaks about the topmost rasa that is there, and that is the conjugal rasa, or the rasa which is exchanged between the gopis and the Supreme Lord. And even to that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks, I want to know more, or I want to hear more. And that is when Ramananda Rai said that I did not meet any person till now who has asked me further beyond this. But since you are asking, and Ramananda Rai said that whatever I am speaking, even I don't know how I am speaking all this. I am just a puppet in your hands. You are the one who is making me speak. Just like even in Prabhupada's that prayers we see, Markene Bhagavad Dharma, he says that just like a puppet you make me dance. So here Ramananda Rai also says that I am just speaking like a puppet. Whatever you are making me speak, I am speaking through my tongue, that is coming out. And that's how he speaks. Then he further speaks about the glories of Radharani. And then he speaks something about Radha Tattva, Krishna Tattva, and all those discussions they have throughout the night. And then after that, after the entire discussions that they have, then they pass away, then they go away, and again they decide they'll meet the next evening. So like that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stays there for 10 days. And they have lots of amazing discussions about the entire Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya and Prayojan. Everything is discussed. And through the medium of Ramananda Rai, all these truths are coming out. Or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes him the medium through which all these different truths are elaborated. And how we see one amazing thing, I was hearing this thing. So in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Dwapar Yuga, Krishna gave the knowledge to Arjuna. Here, Ramananda Rai is an incarnation of Arjuna, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an incarnation of Krishna. And here just the reverse happens. Or reverse, through the mercy of the Lord, Arjuna or Ramananda Rai speaks all the teachings to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is how many discussions happened, many questions were also asked. In the course of later discussions, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked that of all types of education, which is the most important? And then Ramananda Rai says that no education is more important than the transcendental service of the Lord. And like that, many other questions are there. So one of the questions was very important for all of us. He asked, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked that of all kinds of distress, which is the most painful? And Ramanand Rai speaks a very, very important thing. He says, apart from separation from the devotees of Krishna, I know of no unbearable unhappiness. So he says, for in a devotee's life, the greatest unhappiness is being separated from the association of devotees. There is no other unhappiness there is no other miserable condition for a devotee. And another question he asks is that among many songs, which song is considered to be the actual religion of the living entity? And here Ramanand Rai says that the song describing the loving affairs of Sri Radha and Krishna, that is superior to all the songs that are there. And for us, what is that song? For us, the mantra that we have been given, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, that is the superior of all the songs. That is the one which can help us understand this or reach the highest perfection of life. So like that, many discussions they passed away the whole night. And finally, as we all know in the pastime, even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu displays his form, that how is the combined incarnation of Radha and Krishna. He displays this to Ramanand Rai. And he says that this is only meant for you, please don't disclose it to anyone else. So finally the 10 days passed like that. They had amazing discussions, and when the Lord is returning or Lord is going further for his South Indian Yatra, he asked Ramanand Rai that you give up everything, you give up all your occupation or all your engagement, and you come to Jagannath Puri, and you stay with me in Jagannath Puri. And this is how we see that when it comes to that Kurma Brahmana, or even in the past, we know the pastime of Raghunath Das Goswami, when they wanted to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked them to wait. But here to Ramanand Rai, he immediately says that you give up everything and you come with me to Jagannath Puri. Because he knew that how advanced or how exalted Ramanand Rai was. And that was obvious because he was the incarnation of Vishakha Sakhi. So it was literally like Radha and Krishna meeting Vishakha Sakhi. That was the meeting that was happening. So like that it continues, and finally Ramanand Rai leaves his job. And even it's described Pratap Rudra, who was the ruler that time, he assists Ramanand Rai in giving up all the responsibilities he has. And finally, Ramanand Rai goes to Jagannath Puri, and where they had many pastimes in Gambhira. They stayed there for 12 years. So finally, I would like to speak about one more pastime that happened in Jagannath. So this was the pastime of Pradyumna Mishra. So there was again a very, very great devotee of the Lord. His name was Pradyumna Mishra. It's described he was the chief cook of Jagannath, chief cook for Lord Jagannath. And Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya introduced Pradyumna Mishra to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he is a very, very great Vaishnava, very, very great devotee of the Lord. So once what happened, this Pradyumna Mishra, he got a desire that I want to listen to Hari Katha, I want to listen to something about the Lord. And he goes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He goes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that I want to listen to some pastime of the Lord. And Mahaprabhu, out of his humility, that he says, I am not qualified to speak on this subject. And he asked him to go to Ramanand Rai and listen from Ramanand Rai. So now what happens is, Pradyumna Mishra, he goes to meet Ramanand Rai. So that day when he goes to meet Ramanand Rai was occupied in a service. So in Puri there is a place known as Jagannath Vallabh Gardens. So when Pradyumna Mishra approaches Ramanand Rai, that time Ramanand Rai was busy in some service, and so he couldn't get his darshan, or they couldn't have a conversation that time. So later on when he comes to know, he asks that what is Ramanand Rai doing or what is he busy in. So it's described that time he had written one natak or one drama for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. And he was personally engaged in training the Devdasis. Basically, Devdasis are some beautiful young women who Ramanand Rai was personally training for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. Personally training them to sing and dance for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. So when Pradyumna Mishra comes to know that Ramanand Rai is engaged in this service, he gets a little bewildered. He gets a little affected that what kind of service this is. So in the evening when Ramanand Rai comes, he begs his forgiveness that sorry, I am late for this, and we'll meet next time. We'll meet tomorrow or next day for discussing Krishna Katha. So Pradyumna Mishra leaves that place, and for the next few days he doesn't go back to meet Ramanand Rai because he had a doubt in mind. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets Pradyumna Mishra, that time Mahaprabhu asked him that, did you meet Ramanand Rai? Did you hear Krishna Katha from Ramanand Rai? And Pradyumna Mishra didn't speak anything clearly. And that time Mahaprabhu could understand that he has, because he's the Antaryami, he could understand that Pradyumna Mishra has some doubt in his mind. And that time he makes a very amazing statement. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that although I am a sannyasi, I am a renounced, I am expected, or I consider myself to be renounced. But still, what to speak about seeing a woman? Even if I hear the name of a woman, I get affected or I get agitated. But Ramananda Rai is not like that. Ramananda Rai is on a very, very exalted level. He's an exception in that. Even though he's personally engaging in what you call personally engaged in dressing up those Devdasis, engaged in training those Devdasis for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath, he is not affected. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that he has a complete spiritual body. He doesn't even have a tinge of materialism or material infection in his body, and that is why he can only do that service. No one else can. And there Prabhupada also warns that there are many rascals who try to imitate that pastime of Ramananda Rai, try to do all those activities. But actually, no one apart from Ramananda Rai can do that service and not get affected in doing that service personally. So when Pradyumna Mishra hears this, then his doubt is removed, and then he again goes to meet Ramananda Rai, and they again have a discussion on Krishna Katha. And after hearing all that, Pradyumna Mishra becomes very, very satisfied and he comes back. So this is how we see how great this devotee Ramananda Rai was. And as we have already discussed in the final pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he used to feel intense, when he was there in Gambhira and he used to feel intense separation from the Lord, sometimes he used to start rubbing his face against the wall, sometimes hitting his head on the wall. That time these two devotees who were there, that was Swarup Damodara and Ramananda Rai, they were the ones who were engaged in speaking Krishna Katha to the Lord, pacifying the Lord's intense feeling of separation. They were the ones who were there with him. So on this auspicious day, we have the disappearance day of disappearance day of Ramananda Rai. We can actually beg for his mercy. We can beg for his mercy so that we also get some tinge of taste. We get the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we also get the mercy of Radha and Krishna, so that we can also engage ourselves in the devotional service of the Lord more and more and get free from all the anarthas we have. So with this, I would like to end here. And I think we'll end for now. Hare Krishna.